Paul from Recording Magazine. What do you think of what you've heard?
I'm pretty impressed. They image incredibly. So there's a really, especially the new, the larger speakers, the
8361.
61s image incredibly, really wide, three-dimensional. And I really like the way that the low end fills out with the new not a subwoofer. I like the way it fills out. It doesn't really rumble and push like a subwoofer would. It just becomes an extension of the other speakers that it's coupled to, so that's really impressive.
Now we've got Andy, and Andy from MusicTech. You've been here for the press event. What do you think of the show so far?
Very impressive, yeah. I'm very impressed by the sound of the new additions to the Ones range. I mean, yeah, point source monitoring is something else really. It's changes the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I actually reviewed the original Ones that came out 2 years ago for the magazine. The longest time I've ever spent with something, because they were amazing, and I didn't really want to give them back, but you know, so I was looking forward to getting hold of the new ones.
So Nigel from Resolution
Magazine.
What do you think of what you've seen today?
Well, when I heard the Ones for the first time, it was kind of like a breakthrough for me, because as an engineer, which I was some years ago, for about 25 years, I was not a Genelec person, but as soon as I heard the Ones, I listened to material from the 70s, from the 80s, Stevie Wonder, this kind of very respectfully made material, which I was familiar with. I recognised, wow, the Genelec have really come on something with the Ones here, but they were clearly a near-field monitor. I've just been upstairs here at Metropolis Studios listening to the Ones, but with the W371 woofer, which I might call an adaptive low-frequency loudspeaker. I've been told by Aki not to say that it's a subwoofer.
It's not a subwoofer.
It's not a subwoofer, but I listened to some material which I mixed in the 80s and the 90s from Roger Waters and other artists, and the impression that I get from a relatively small midfield monitor with a 371 low frequency extension is somewhat similar to the 1035 on which I mixed this material in the first place. It has that extension. I can hear the mistakes that I made on SSL 9000.
Is that a good or a bad thing to hear the mistakes?
I think it's a realistic thing. You know, I know the mistakes that I made as an engineer, and you know, we're talking about the difference between 80 hertz or a 70 hertz high pass filter, or we're talking about the difference between, you know, a small adjustment on an SSL for the bell curve on a boost that you've chosen. And I know, you know, the material is out there. I know the mistakes I made. I know the positive stuff that I did, and I can hear it all with the 371. It adds that extension to the Ones. The other thing that I notice in all the rooms in Metropolis is that, which I know fairly well, is that when you move around the rooms, the off-axis response, whether the 371 is in use or not, is really remarkable, and I think that's a big selling point, especially for, you know, broadcast work or work where there's sort of movie work where there are a lot of people giving notes to a mixer and they're not necessarily in the sweet spot, but they're maybe behind or off to the side, and they're actually judging what they're listening to and handing the notes to the mixer. It's not maybe so relevant for music mixing these days, where it's generally unattended mixing, but I think for any attended mixing, you have this problem always where the people around you are maybe not getting the same picture that you are, and this is a great feature of the Ones, is the off-axis response. Yay for Genelec!
Paul from Headliner, nice to meet you.
And you?
What are your first impressions of the systems?
Well, considering I use the 8340 ones in our studio, which I love, I've always been amazed at the amazing amount of low end that goes into those things, as well as the sparkling tops. What was amazing was hearing it with I think you call them adaptable woofers.
That's right.
It felt like another extension, a natural extension. Then when you hear it without them, you don't want to hear it again. Even though they sound great in their own, because I know they do. It just seemed to have something just fairly unexplainable. It just sort of fit. It feels like you're just adding another piece. And it doesn't behave. Well, it does behave. It has the sub frequencies. It does behave like a sub, but it's different to it. And I understood that when they showed the adaptable array, the adaptable woofer on its own. Just hearing the kind of frequencies it's hitting is obviously it's getting the sub frequencies, but it's also getting that 200 area, which I thought was really great. Yeah.
I'm Neil Pickles. I work at PS Entertainment Mastering, and I'm also an educator.
Great. And what do you think of what you heard today?
I thought it was an improvement over the 8260As, which I was a fan of. I did use those for several sort of demonstration mastering masterclasses. I was really blown away by the whole configuration of the system. The way you could flip it from potentially stereo mastering over to a full Dolby Atmos or Auro 3D type environment, and the integration of the GML, it's GML software, isn't it?
GLM.
GLM, sorry, I'm confusing it with a well-known EQ that I happen to use. Yeah, the GLM software, that is really quite an eye-opener, because with the way things are going with ever-increasing demand for content from various TV providers and the need to provide multi-channel support for that, the need for DSP and the ability to recalibrate and reconfigure for different potential uses is there. So you could actually end up with a very high-value system where you on the one hand, I could be working in traditional two-track stereo, but then a client could want to do something in a surround environment, and you can very easily with the software flip over. I was actually quite blown away with, they had it set up in the SSL K series room, and they just literally knocked up an Atmos system. Then they played a few demos, some of which was field recorded using a shops array. And if you consider that was not a permanent install, and they just rigged it up, ran the software, hit go, I thought that was pretty incredible. And so for me, the interesting point really is the sheer flexibility of the system, and the multi-channel aspect of it is fascinating. Game design, things like that, sound design, and the ever-increasing need for multi-channel music potentially. So that's my thoughts on it. I was quite impressed.
I'm Katie Tavini.
Right. And what do you do?
I'm a mastering engineer based in Brighton now.
Lovely part of the world.
Very nice.
What kind of impression did the new monitors make on you?
Very nice, very, very nice. I was like super sucked in on the immersive setup. Right. That was amazing. I don't get to experience that kind of stuff very often.
That's penguins, you know?
Oh, those penguins are amazing. But yeah, the nature sounds, and you know the show really at the end where it's like lightning and all of that stuff was really, really impressive. And yeah, I went to the mastering room, and God, the volume knob that comes with those speakers is like the best volume knob I've ever tried. It's so good. So yeah, speakers sound amazing, of course, but yeah, just the sort of interaction with them was really nice. So yeah. That's
really nice to hear. I hope you've had a really good evening, and thank you.
No worries, I've had a lovely time. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
I hate being videoed.